Thanks for joining us on another episode of Tea and Trowels, FPAN's web series featuring conversations with archaeologists. Today, I'm joined with CITiZAN archaeologist, Lara Band. Would you like to introduce yourself and your mug?
Okay, hiya. Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me on. This is great. It feels really exciting to be talking across the Atlantic, actually. So, so I said, I am one of the archaeologists with CITiZAN, which is the Coastal and Intertidal Zone Archaeology Network. And we're an England-wide community archaeology project looking at coastal erosion and working with volunteers to record and monitor at-risk sites. I'm actually in, but you can't see it because I've actually got my CITiZAN hoodie on, but yeah, you can't see it. Well, you could. Just oh, and my
love
mug.
it.
Yeah. So this is my mug. It's Newcastle. It's not actually my favourite archaeology mug is in the office, and I haven't seen it since March because of lockdown. But this is my favourite home mug, and I'll keep it there. It's I don't know if you have this in the States, but it's Blue Circle Cement. It's a big cement company, but this logo was designed in the 1970s by someone called FHK Henryan, who's a really famous graphic designer. He did the KLM logo and lots of different things. And I think I was given this mug, but I might actually have sort of co-opted it and never given it back. But it kind of speaks of, because my background pre-archaeology was art history. So the whole sort of graphic designer aspect is the sort of art history bit. But also I've done quite a lot of buildings archaeology in my time. So I like it for being about cement.
Oh, I love it. I'll introduce my mug because I officially have more mugs now, which is a big part of my spiel these last few episodes. It was a Christmas present, but it's the Calamity Bear, where it's meant to be Blue Willow, but now it's calamities with all the sea monsters and evil snowmen in the works. So a little bit of fun whimsy, but you talk about design and how they adapted the Blue Willow pattern with, just through graphic design to make it a whole new series. And my co-host Emily Jane got it for me, which I think is because I got her the original Calamity Wear supposedly for last Christmas, but it showed up around March when we started down. Best with gift delivery.
Oh, that's lovely. That's quite funny because the mug, my favourite archaeology mug that's stuck in the office was actually a present from some volunteers, and it's the from Hastings, and it's the Bayeux tapestry of the Battle of Hastings. But when you look closely, they're like eating cupcakes and riding bicycles. So it's a really similar idea. Oh, it's lovely.
Oh, that's fantastic. When you get back in the office, we'll just have to do a little quick reshoot just for social media.
Yeah.
You can see the mug.
Okay.
All right, well, we'll get started. And our first question is, how did you get into archaeology?
I kind of fell into archaeology, actually. Yeah, I know the sort of classic thing is like, people who wanted to be an archaeologist from a really early age, and I wasn't. I sort of had a lot of career ideas, but eventually settled on I wanted to do something to do with like history, politics, films, something, architecture, I don't know. But anyway, in the end, I ended up doing a degree in history of design and the visual arts and majoring in film and architecture. And I had, I don't know, some vague plans about what I wanted to do, but I didn't really know. But it kind of turned out it didn't matter because I graduated in 1991, right into the middle of a really bad recession. So there weren't any jobs anyway. So to put it in context, so unemployment when I graduated was 10%. And to put that in context, unemployment now is about 4.9%. It was really quite, so graduated, jobless, drifted around, did some crummy jobs for quite a while. And then I found a government training scheme for experimental archaeology and doing experimental archaeology and taking it into schools and teaching kids. And I thought, that sounds quite fun, actually. It was really, really good. So I did that and was encouraged to study archaeology at night school, and then did some volunteering with a local archaeology group, and then got employment from them. And here I am sort of been a bit via museums and some different stuff on the way. But yeah, so I didn't come in the traditional route, and I didn't come in particularly really wanting to be an archaeologist, but I found my way.
I love it. It does seem to, it's a career that finds the right people. So I think when, I guess, archaeology finds people they want to keep, they definitely just, it keeps popping up.
Yeah.
So what is your current research?
So I am currently, as I said, working for CITiZAN, we're a community archaeology project. And I mean, actually it's great because it's really broad. So we don't sort of have a time-based remit. We have a geographical remit, and I work in East Kent completely. So I look after what's called the East Kent Coast Discovery Programme. And I mean, I've sort of got a few bits of current research going on that are all quite different. So we're looking at some fish traps in one area, which are actually probably post-medieval. But they're really interesting, looking at you know, how much the foreshores may be dropped, or actually even changes every time we go back. Like more posts are visible. There's about 1,000 stakes we've recorded. So you know, sometimes you go back and some aren't visible and some are. So you know, it's a really interesting site for looking at mobile foreshores. Then another site we've got on the go is Second World War site, where there's lots of defences in a small area, and actually the records say there were none left and they're all taken away, but actually we've done field walking with volunteers, we've found quite a lot. So that's another site that we're looking at. I'm also looking at a 1970s hoverport at the moment, which is exciting. Recently did a project there with East Kent MenCap with a group of their photographers, so people with sort of really differing abilities, and we went out, photographed the site, and then had an exhibition of the work. So it's kind of arts based, but it also worked as quite a free form condition survey, and it was, you know, really, really interesting to work with them. And we were planning on working again this year, but obviously COVID sort of knocked that out, but we will we will in future. So it's like, it's a whole range, you know, we could be doing anything from any period, sort of any sorts of remains, just as long as it's on the coast and at risk, which is brilliant. It's really, really good.
Yeah, it sounds like when people ask me my current research or what I even do for a living, it's depending on the day, depending on the month, depending what's, like you said, exposed. For a lot of when we do our similar program, the Heritage Market Scouts, a lot of times it's either we're doing our classic work from home, or it's we drop everything, we go out to quick check out this site, or you know, even a development project where the state, the Division of Historical Resources, their Archaeological Bureau, if they can't send somebody to our region, we'll pop down and make sure, like, okay, no, that's not a shipwreck, that's pressure treated lumber that washed up from a hurricane, it's okay. Or respond to local people's finds that eventually wash up or get eroded out. So keeping with the fieldwork kind of idea, what is your favorite tool in your toolkit?
Well, as I bought two, because one is really my favorite, but I never get to use it anymore, but I wanted to show it off. So I probably can't even get all of this in screen. But of course, it's every British archaeologist's favorite tool, the mattock. But it's got a nice story, this one, because obviously mattocks are super useful. Do you use them much in the States or not?
Not really. I've only ever used one once, and it was on a field project, and the PI at the time wasn't aware of what was lying underneath what we call ironstone, which is like a level of kind of really not dense sandstone, but we cored it, and it showed that it was only like a small little strata, and she wanted to know what was underneath it in the shovel test, and literally cracked it all out, and then all what showed up more was more ironstone, and that was the only time I've ever used one, and that was in a 50 centimeter square test for having a controlled excavation.
No, you need a big trench. I mean, so this one. So I moved to Finland in about 2006 and was working as an archaeologist there, and I couldn't believe they didn't have mattocks. I mean, it wasn't that you can use, I mean, they had other tools that were probably equally exciting that you never see over here, but I was desperate to get a mattock, so I actually had to order it from the UK, which was incredibly heavy, and of course I could only really order the head, not the handle, because otherwise it would have been ridiculous to post. But I was working for the Åland Islands Board of Antiquities, and they have a big group of like carpenters, stonemasons as well, who look after the sort of buildings, cultural heritage buildings. So one of them very kindly said he'd make the handle for me, but he'd never seen a mattock before. So he measured me up and made a handle. So it's actually a bespoke handle, which is much longer than usual handles, which made me think. And I think this is I think sometimes archaeologists are just kids who've never grown up, because, you know, it's always like you see something like, but why is that? So as soon as he made me this handle, and this mattock is absolutely gorgeous, she's like nicest mattock I've ever used, I'm like, why a mattock handle so short? What can it mean? And stuff. But it's lovely, and it's really nicely shaped, so, you know, it's quite ergonomic. And so, but yeah, I don't get to use it anymore because we just record and monitor, and we don't really mattock through things.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous piece talking about the why questions for our field work or our field tools. We just had a very long conversation with a few friends about how all of the shovels and tools that are designed for like a 6 foot tall man. And so when you are a shorter female, you're like, you can't find tools that really work well. And we've joked around for years about making a line of archaeological tools based on your height and your hand width spread and all of that, just to make it more comfortable to use.
Yeah, I guess because you probably can't tell, I also look really short, but I'm about 5'8" and I've got quite big hands, so I've actually always been lucky, and I never really figured it, you know, and it never occurred to me it was a huge problem until I sort of, you know, started working with much smaller, you know, often women on site. I'm like, oh, and like even like getting steel toe cap boots if you've got anything under a size 6. Luckily I've also got big feet, so, but yeah, and those are the sort of things you don't think about, but I think there's been quite good moves. I don't know about in the States a bit, but you know, there's now people making, you know, safety wear specifically for women. So like, I've actually got a pair of trousers that fits now for the first time. High-vis trousers. That's quite exciting. That's quite exciting.
I'm 5'7", so I never thought about it until a bunch of my colleagues are like 5'1", 5'2", or shorter, and there's like, my shovel's just the same size as me. Like, yeah. How do you maneuver that?
Yeah, and the weight and like the weight ratio and all those sorts of things. Yep. Yeah, all bespoke archaeological tools. That would be nice. I did say it. Now I know everyone know. But yeah, my second tool, and this is quite sad, I think, actually, but a mobile phone, because we have, I can show it to the screen, but there we go. We have an app that we use with our volunteers to record coastal and foreshore archaeology. So that's really great. So we use it for that, but also, I mean, when you're on the foreshore, and I'm sure you know, you recognize this, so you really don't want to be carrying a ton of stuff with you. So the phone is like the best thing that you can use for doing all your recording, for taking photographs, for doing all your social media when you're on site, and everything. And also, one of the sites I work on in Kent has quite a lot of unexploded ordnance washing up, and we've been twice have been cleared off the beach because we've found ordnance. And so yeah, mobile phones also really useful for calling the Coast Guard when you find shells. Like bang shells, not seashells.
Yeah. We're actually on our app, so I will be very excited when we can have our app program as well. But I would have to agree, we use our cell phones for everything with monitoring, from the photographs. We've been obsessed with an app called Solocator that will put the direction and the GPS as an overlay, as a watermark on all of your photos.
Oh, you have to send me that.
I will. I joke around, a lot of our videos were like not sponsored by Solocator. We just need to share this knowledge because it's for archaeological monitoring. And then you can also put, if you pay a little extra, you can put in notes in your watermarks, like which sites, what you identified, etc., which is just brilliant. But yeah, we're always connected to phones. I have my 2 are sitting right here.
Yeah,
on all of our GPS. Yep. All of our GPS, all of our ARC maps, everything is on the phone. And also just safety, because I'm a wanderer when I get into the field, especially with monitoring a site. It can always call me back because I forget that I'm like, oh wait, I should, stick with the major group.
Yeah, safety first.
Exactly. So kind of continuing on again with the whole like undertone of our field work, what is your best, worst field stories? So stories that in the field were pretty not so great, but you can look back on them and get a good giggle.
Yeah, well, I think I'm actually lucky. I've never had any actually horrendous experiences on site, which is good going. I think it's pretty good going. I mean, I did almost end up in emergency with clay with flint, flint, and it's really sharp, and I did almost end up in accident emergency because my hand wouldn't stop bleeding, but that's really boring, so you can cut that one out. No, I think probably my grimmest field experience was it was quite early on, but it didn't put me off, clearly, and it was just the kind of whole thing, like we were staying away, it was an away job. It was winter, but we were staying in accommodation that was obviously summer accommodation, so it was freezing, it was really damp, as only the UK can be, this kind of horrible freezing to the bones damp. So everything, you get into your sleeping bag at night and it would be wet, and all my books started doing this and everything. And then one morning I went to the fridge and I poured out some orange juice, took a swig, and I felt something, and I spat it back out, and there was an earwig in the orange juice. And so that was really horrible. And then I felt this like tickle in my pants, and I mean UK pants, not US pants. You see what I mean? So I ran to my room and like whipped them down, and there was an earwig in my pants that must have like crawled into my clothes when I put it was just awful. And then we got to site, and it was a huge quarry site, like a really exposed quarry with, I can't remember any archaeology from there, so I'm not even sure if there was any archaeology. And there was a dead swan in the middle of the site that must have hit the overhead cables and then just dropped into the site. And it was just grim. It was just unremittingly grim. And then we went to dig, and the ground was frozen, and you couldn't dig at all. And I just burst into tears. It's the only time I've ever cried on site, but it was just so utterly miserable. It was so cold. But then we got the day off, and we were near a nuclear power station that had a visitor's centre, so we got a tour around the nuclear power station, which was quite fun. Until they ushered us on, because one of the guys had lost his badge. So we saw these guys, we were like looking down at where the fuel rods were. I don't know, should I even say this? Like, this was years ago, it'll be fine. And this guy was like looking down, and then his mate was like looking down, and they started to like try and winch something up. And the woman who was showing us around was going, oh no, we should move on. I don't know if he's found his badge that's dropped into the fuel rods. But yeah, everything's fine. And this was quite a few years ago. But it was, I mean, as I say, it's not like, I was watching some of your Tea and Trowels podcasts, and it's like nowhere near as bad as some people's stories, but it was just the unremitting grimness.
Yeah, and the compounding effect. Earwigs are one bugs I cannot do, which is, they're so small, but there's something about them that absolutely just turns my insides.
Be quick.
Yeah, and thankfully, I have not encountered any of them down here. It's mostly my childhood stories of earwigs. But I had kind of the same experience with a bug. I was doing field work in New Mexico. I was in my sleeping bag, and middle of the night, and it's a desert environment, so it drops down to around 0 degrees Celsius. And it gets cold, and then during the day, you're like, up into the like 40s and 50s Celsius. So it's like this huge dramatic change. Well, I'm in my sleeping bag and I'm half asleep, and I feel something crawling on me, and I just reach down and grab it and throw it. And I'm still like asleep, and I wake up in the morning, I was like, oh, I had this weird dream, but my hand smelled horrible. and I couldn't figure out at all, like it smelled like bacitracin or like neosporin, and that kind of medicinal band-aidy scent, and could not figure it out until like I was packing up some gear to get ready, and there's this beetle. It's about this big that apparently that's their way to, like, if they're feeling cornered and threatened, they put off this stench. But my hand smelled like that for a good 2 days.
Wow.
To get the smell off of me. And this thing was in my sleeping bag, which is a mummy bag, so you have to shimmy into it to begin with. And I'm like, this was me after I took a shower outside under the tree, and it was on me the entire time as I crawled into my sleeping bag, or it had somehow made it into the tent, into my sleeping bag, and was just nestled in there. But
oh, no.
I can still smell that.
We don't have bugs that big here.
Yeah, it was a big guy. I'm still not entirely sure what type of bug it was. It was just some sort of nasty smelling beetle.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like beetles, but yeah, not in your sleeping bag.
No, especially like what else is in my sleeping bag? Because we had like rattlesnakes. There's never saw any, but they talked about scorpions and everything else. And I'm like,
yeah, no,
in my sleeping bag that I'm gonna get, like, you know, wake up in the morning with my foot swollen. I'm gonna go, you know, have to get a light helicopter out of here.
Wow.
I could understand the compounding effects of one earwig in your mouth. No, I would probably have walked away, been like, I'm done for the day. This is
I think I think I was young and naive. I don't know.
So our last question is kind of our big meaty question. It's, how do you think that archaeology can help save the world?
Well, that is a really big question, isn't it? I was thinking a lot about this, and I was thinking, I mean, it works on all scales as well, doesn't it? I mean, there's like micro to macro, and I was thinking that I think just that making a fundamental difference to one person's life can be as important as saving the world sometimes, maybe. So you know, just working with community archaeology and with volunteers, that we've had some volunteers who've worked with us who, through working with us, have then found the confidence to apply to go to university or to apply for jobs, and have got jobs in archaeology. And I think that's actually really important. And I think, you know, often we go for sort of, you know, the quantitative, oh yeah, we engaged like 400 and something people and stuff. But I think sometimes those qualitative, actually we made a real difference to one person's life. I think that sort of, I think that contributes to saving the world sometimes. I was also thinking about this, I've worked sort of, or, you know, I've worked quite a few times with sort of kids that have, I mean, even actually on one site I worked on, it was a community dig, and the teacher said to me, oh, you've got to watch those 3 lads, they're really difficult, I'll split them up. And you know, and he was pretty much saying, oh, they'll amount to nothing, and you know, but actually working with them, and I found this, you know, before as well, with the sort of the kids that have been labelled bad kids, that they're the ones that are like, you know, they're really energetic, they're really inquisitive, they sort of think beyond maybe what you're doing. And I think archaeology work is really, really good, because, oh no, I've lost my thread. We're gonna have to, sorry.
No, it's, I'm sitting here like in my head, like, yes. Because I had the same, I taught high school, so I had the same experience with students who are classically kind of labeled as destructive in the formal class setting, when placed in a like a field environment, were the best students, because it was a way for them to channel their energy that they had, and that passion and that joy. And these kids were some of the best. So I think you're saying changing the world can be literally one person's world.
Yeah, and I think it is. I mean, I think archaeology is, because I think it's such a good mix of like the sort of the material and practical and the mental, that sometimes, you know, and that's what's really, really, really good for people. I was having a joke with friends about, like, most archaeologists are square pegs, you know, like about putting a square peg in a round hole, and most and a lot of archaeologists I know are people that don't quite fit in anything else, but archaeology is the place that maybe you can fit, because you have to think in quite a lot of different or creative ways sometimes. And I think that's why it's really good for sort of kids that maybe aren't that good at doing that well at school, because you can be like, you know, all your ideas going off in different directions potentially. So I was sort of thinking that was one answer, and I was thinking sort of to the macro, I mean, sort of maybe flipping the question on its head a bit, that I think that when it comes to saving the world, I think maybe that archaeology needs to do a bit of saving itself saving itself from itself, maybe, for, you know, sort of, you know, really need an across the board recognition of the colonial foundations of archaeology and the way it supports systems in, you know, in carrying on doing things the way we do them. It supports the sort of the systems it set up in the beginning, and I think so we have to recognize that it's not a particularly diverse profession as a profession, and often with a lot of the volunteers we work with. So, you know, so much more work we need to do there, and I think a lot more listening and working with groups. So in the States, you've got Society of Black Archaeologists, Museum Detox over here doing great work, the European Society of Black and Allied Archaeologists. We need to really be listening to groups, you know, and seeing how we can do things better, and supporting people that are doing things better, and sort of following their lead, not sort of going, oh, actually I've got the answer now and I'm going to run in and do this. And I think we have to be quite prepared to give up our position as gatekeepers, even if we don't like being you know, we say we're not gatekeepers and stuff, you know, I think maybe sometimes we still are a bit. So looking much more at co-creation, and, you know, how we can really help affect change, and if that means sort of stepping to one side and letting other people speak, you know, I think that's what we have to do. And then, I mean, it does come back, and, you know, I do struggle with this, and I've talked to people about this, and, you know, actually then sort of fitting all those ideas into your job, specifically into your job every day, is then actually becomes really hard again. So, you know, sort of recognizing where we can do those things. I was on this campaign trail recently, and I don't know if anyone agreed with me, because I've sort of explained it to people, and people are like, oh, but I was thinking, you know, even just stuff like we use when we write reports, we tend to use the passive voice a lot in writing reports, and it kind of removes all the people from reports, and once you've removed people, it's very difficult to challenge authority that doesn't see, this is why no, it's because I can't explain what I mean. But it's sort of, you know, by saying, you know, a trench was dug rather than we dug a trench, it's kind of, you know, you can't challenge people who don't exist in reports, and we sort of kind of erase the people out of reports all the time, even ourselves, but that gives us a position of power.
I think it kind of harkens back to the language in which we used to write reports in, or still do write in, that are inherently exclusive. It's such a jargon-filled technical report that it excludes people who don't have the certain collegiate educations. It excludes the general public. It excludes interested parties, because no one wants to sit down and read academic or archaeological reports, that gray matter. And we write that way to make us, you know, be a little bit more removed, or a little bit more standoffish. So I think you're really right. You can't challenge that when there is no human to officially challenge, or you can't challenge it when you can't fully like understand the purpose for the language use.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also just easy. I mean, you know, so we've been writing reports I mean, I can, you know, writing reports just slip so easily into that style of language. That's the last report I've been writing. I've been really trying not to. I've actually having to go back and edit what I've written to sort of remove that language, and it takes longer. but I think it's really important.
So I agree, especially your statements on fixing our own house. I think that's one way we can help save the world, is one, just by admitting to our own issues that we have within the discipline of archaeology, and really confront that, and how inaccessible archaeology really is to people, lower economic standing, minority groups, and how we as a profession have created that culture.
Yeah, no, I think it's true, and I sometimes think, sometimes I think of archaeology more. It's not maybe like the study of all the things, all the old things that we dig up that can save the world and what those say. It's actually how we deliver archaeology. So it's archaeology is the method, is the thing that is possibly and potentially empowering or enabling. Sometimes when I've taught people, I don't want everyone to run away and want to become an archaeologist, but I want them to understand that there's places they can go to do research, or that people will listen to them because they've got a new confidence, just from coming out socially or something, like maybe people that are shyer. I think archaeology can do a lot of things with its method, sort of outside even the historical stuff.
No, absolutely agree. This is kind of the idea of the question, was to be so broad and to get into our opinions of the profession, and really how we think what archaeology is going to look like in the future. Like, how do we progress? So for our last question now, this is our little bit of bonus, our whimsy. What is currently keeping you sane during lockdown, quarantine, the general craziness of the world?
Well, let me think. There's been a few things. I mean, I've been doing tons of work, so it's not like I've had tons of time to do stuff. But in the first lockdown, I dug up my garden with my mattock, and that was quite exciting because I found a garden path that we didn't know was there, and the base of a brick-built linear feature, which I still don't know what it is. I suspect it's the bottom of a fish pond, but I don't know. It's a tiny garden, so I don't know what they were doing with a fish pond in there. But so I did archaeology in my own garden. I'm the world's laziest person. I love being out all day walking on site, but I will not do exercise if it's for exercise sake. But I thought I have to do something, so I've been teaching myself how to hula hoop. I'm really bad, but I'm getting better. So
I love that. I recently tried, and I cannot hula hoop anymore. It is definitely a skill I've lost since childhood.
It's one I never had, so I'm really excited to develop it. But really big hoop, that's the key, apparently. And I'm also doing, and actually this plays a bit into the last question, I'm also started doing modules from the Masters in Contemporary Art and Archaeology at the University of Highlands and Islands in Scotland by distance learning. And that's really, really interesting. So I've had tons of coursework, but it's sort of looking at crossovers between art and archaeology. And actually, it's a very practical course. It's actually like doing art, which is great. But I think that's sort of another key to archaeology, sort of expanding and maybe working with wider groups of people, is to be much more transdisciplinary and sort of work within the arts a bit more, and collaborations and that sort of stuff. So that's been really exciting. I could do a show and tell, actually.
Go for it.
Trip over my mattock on the way. So I was doing it on the hoverport. So I need to get back to the hoverport, which I mentioned earlier, to do stuff. But so I've been making, so that's a basket made out of a Admiralty chart. But that's fine. That's another. So that's made out of grass and rubber to represent the hovercraft. And this one, which is made out of So the Hoverpot is a huge derelict site now, but all the buildings are gone, but it's a really popular dog walking site. It's a massive concrete apron and all plants are all growing back over it and stuff. But it's also a place where people go to fly tip stuff. So what I just showed was just loads of metal bands from holding pallets of bricks together have been fly tipped. So I grabbed them and made them into a basket. So that's how I've been keeping myself busy.
I love it. I also like that almost all of your what's keeping you busy and sane is still somehow connected to archaeology and to work.
Yeah.
I think that just shows it's it's not surprising that another archaeologist is like doing crafts or things in their free time that still relate back to archaeology, because I think we're no one archaeology for the money.
No, well, also, I mean, baskets are such a sort of archaeological thing, but also, you know, so I was looking at like landscape and trying to sort of capture somehow the material landscape, the materiality of the landscape when there's not so much there apart from some of the stuff that people are now dumping and plants growing. And oh, I don't know. I'm trying to learn. I'm not an artist. That's what I can say. But
they look great. They look like baskets. I think that's all that matters. All right. Well, this was the end of our interview. So I just want to say thank you and well, cheers.
Chin chin.